Hey there, it's Olivia Savannah here from Olivia's Catastrophe and welcome to part 2 of my January wrap-up. In January I read 23 books and it was quite a lot, so I decided to split my wrap-up in two. Make sure you check out the previous video, which I'll have linked down below if you're interested in it. In this one I'm going to be reviewing all of the books that I read that I was sent for review, so I'm not going to put the review tag when I lift up every book. Just know that all of these were sent by publishers and thank you so much for sending them my way. I'm going to have content warnings in the description box down below, but without any further ado, let's get right down to the books. So I read a whole trilogy back to back, all in one go. In fact, I read them all in 1 week. This is monumental for me. This never really happens, and it's been years since I've been so addicted to a book. And that series is the Priest series by Simone, which starts with Priest and then goes Sinner and then ends with Saint. These are essentially a romance series, okay? It's very steamy. It's very steamy. And it's also quite like, it's for a certain trope. Let's go book by book. So first of all, we got Priest. This one is following a priest and he's taken his vows of celibacy, so he's not supposed to be having any sex with anyone. But he ends up finding this girl called Poppy who wears red lipstick and he just can't keep away from her. And so they kind of start having this love affair and he's got to decide whether he should be with Poppy or if he should stay a priest. That is essentially the story, and let me tell you, steam is off the charts. I'm telling you, Simone, she knows how to write a very good sex scene, okay? She knows how to write a very good sex scene. And if that's what you want from your romance book, that is what she is going to give you. If you get behind the whole forbidden romance, I'm a holy figure, and then you just throw in all of this like religious terminology into your sexy times, this is a book for you. I started this book and then I quickly was not able to stop reading this book and I couldn't put it down. But my enjoyment started off here, and the more and more I read of the book, the less and less I enjoyed it. And so I'm going to tell you about this. So in the beginning I loved it. I thought it was really amazing writing in terms of certain scenes, and I kind of liked the whole forbidden romance element. But Poppy never became more than a manic pixie dream girl. She has red lipstick and she's super innocent and super smart and super rich, but also she's done some like really naughty girl things. And that is her entire personality. We don't see what gives her interest outside of her being an angel, but also being a devil at the same time. That is literally her entire personality. And as the book went on and I kept expecting her character to develop and have a bit more depth to her, just like our male point of view's character Tyler, who we're following, has, it did not happen. She just remained a manic pixie dream girl, and therefore my enjoyment started to eke down. But also it got a bit tiring. Like, all they do is have sex and have sex and have sex, and like, it's really good sex, written very well, but at some point, you know, you just have enough of it. And so my enjoyment eked down a bit further. I need to put it out here right now. I think many of you will see that I wear a cross in my videos and I am a Christian, but I'm not Catholic and I don't associate with the Catholic Church at all. I'm very anti-ritualistic, and it really frustrated me that he couldn't see how he could be a Christian and not be celibate. Like, just he couldn't understand how you could have sex and be a Christian, and I was just like, this is not difficult, like, just figure it out. So the more that he was fighting his inner battle of like, how can I be a priest but also have a girl, my enjoyment went down. The longer it took for him to kind of just make sense of what I personally see as a very simple thing, a simple fact. So I got more and more frustrated with this book, and I did like the fact that this was from the male perspective. I feel like these days I read so much romance, and all of it is from the woman's perspective, which is really nice, and unless it's a queer book, it's never from the man's perspective. So it was kind of nice to see that. It still is not the best, and I recommend skipping this book and not reading it. And what I recommend you doing instead is getting to the good bit and skipping straight to Sinner, the second book in the series by Simone, which I gave 5 stars and is a new favourite. I know, I usually say, if you don't like the first book in a series, don't continue. I defied my own rules and I read this book in under 24 hours because I could not stop. I could not stop. I actually worked for like 9 of those hours and I still finished this book in under 24 hours. The shame. So this one, how does this one differ? So this one differs by the fact that, again, we're following Tyler's brother and he is 36. And then he sees someone at a party and she is quite young and she is actually 21 years old and is a nun. And he just wants to do unspeakable things to this nun. And she's a nun in training, so she's supposed to be working towards taking her vows. And as she works towards taking her vows, she is a virgin, she's never had sex before, and the head of the nunnery decides that before you take your vows and decide to have a celibate life, you should, you know, just go and have sex and see what it's like and see if this is something you truly want to give up. So that's the storyline. And also, maybe she ends up being his best friend's younger sibling. And also what's going on in the background, which is actually a really important thing, is that his mother has cancer and it's terminal. So he's working with that like pre-feelings of grief and responsibility, but also knowing that at some point his mother is going to pass away and he is going to be struggling with his emotions. And so this book kind of includes lots of things that I like in it. We've got a grief storyline. We've got really well written sex scenes, which we've established she can do in the first book, but does somehow even better in this one. And we also get to see fully developed characters who need to develop. And in this one, I think Sean, our main character that we're following, does so much growth and does so much developing that I was really happy to have seen that form. But also I really liked the way that, yes, we do get really good steamy scenes that are really sexy. And although you can still have the kink that some people prefer of it like tied up in these religious elements, it's not just about I shouldn't be having sex because I'm religious. It's more so about how can sex and celibacy work together with religion. And I quite liked the discussions about that, and I think it added a lot more complexity than the first book did. But also I really appreciated the way that it talked about religion outside of the sex whatsoever. Their mum, who used to be part of their church and kind of fell out with the church because of certain reasons, has suddenly started to believe in God again, and Sean, who feels betrayed by the church, is kind of struggling with this because his mother is now suddenly back to being religious and this person that he's seeing is very devout and religious, and now he's questioning what does he feel about religion himself. And I think, oh, that's such an interesting topic, and it's wrapped up in all of this hot sex and also this grief, and it was like really well balanced and really well done. I won't say that this book has no flaws. It's one that became a new favourite and I gave it 5 stars fully well knowing it has flaws, but that I read this in 24 hours and I enjoyed it and I consumed it and it was the only thing I could think about for 24 hours. That deserves a 5-star rating from me. And so yes, the age gap romance in this one is very, very cringe. They do some things that are really cringe and I was just like, no, that's a big no from me. Don't do an age gap romance this way. Please don't. There were some glaring moments like that, and there were also some moments where I was like, this is cringe. This is so cringe. And I still read it and I still consumed it and I still loved it. And then last but not least, I read Saint, which I thought was good, but not the best. I enjoyed this one and I think it's worth reading if you enjoyed Sinner, but it's better than Priest. And in this one we're following, listen, another one of the siblings, another brother, and he is a monk. So he has taken vows of celibacy and he became a monk very suddenly. It had to do with depression, and he also has this ex-boyfriend who comes to visit the monastery that he's working at, and then things go down from there. And I appreciated the fact that we had a bisexual monk main character and that was not in question. Like the fact that he was queer and within the Catholic Church was not in question. I liked seeing that. I liked that that was just how things were and it was fine. I also don't particularly tend to like the ex-boyfriend is engaged but now he's come back to visit me and what might happen, because that often lends into cheating, which is one of my least favourite things to read about. But I guess the way it handled it in this book, I could accept it and I could read it and be fine with it. It also has quite a lot of steamy scenes, as we can tell, serious Simone likes her steamy scenes. It's what she does well, and while these ones were good, I actually think this is the one that was least about the sex. This one was more about the storyline and more about the development. A lot of it talks about mental health within church and what church can give you when it comes to supporting your mental health, but also the ways in which sometimes it can fail you. So it talks about all of those. Again, it brought up the themes that priest did of like, I want to be a monk, but I want to have lots of sex. But it does it in a more balanced and what I believe to be a more effective way, because it takes some of the in-training elements from Sinner, which I think were done so well, and kind of combines that with the things that were in Priest to make this book. So I think it did a very good job of like balancing what the first two books brought on offer and compiling it into another one. The books get steadily longer and longer as the series goes on, and this one is 400 pages, and it did not need to be 400 pages, but I did like this one. I thought it was nice. I do think Elijah again needed more personality. I think the only one where the love interest actually had personality was the second book in the series, but for what it's worth, I think it did this one fairly well. And again, I read it very, very quickly. The only reason I didn't read it faster was because I was actually doing life things that I couldn't get out of. But it was a good time. I raced through the series. It consumed my life for a whole week. What can I say? Next up, I read a short story collection because I've been loving those lately, and I finally read The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deesha Philyaw. And this is a collection, they're really, like, honestly guys, I don't often read so many church books back to back, but this has a lot to do with church as well. So in this one, we're following black, largely queer main characters who are in some way associated with the church, whether that's because their mother is sleeping with the married pastor of a church, or whether they've been kicked out of a church because they're queer, whether they're queer and they're still attending church. Something to do with church often comes into each and every single one of these short stories, and we're just following these black women who are church ladies, who used to be church ladies, who know church ladies, and what they get up to in their secret lives. So a lot of it has to do with sex, once again, but not in the way that the romance series was. It's more so in a literary sense. There's no way for me to describe this very accurately. I really, really liked these short stories, but personally I struggled with them because a lot of them contain cheating, and as I've mentioned in this video before, cheating is not something I enjoy reading about on a personal level, but if it doesn't bother you, I think you're going to love this short story collection. The short stories are quite varied in tone, and I just appreciated how each one of them felt like they could fit into a short story. We see a snippet of their lives, or we see the breadth of their lives, but it always works in the format that the story gives it, and it always feels like a complete and finished short story by the end of it. I had some favourites, and I'm just going to list them here for people who have read the collection. I really liked Dear Sister. That one focuses more so on sisterhood and the messy dynamics of a complex family, and I thought it did it very, very well. I also liked Snowfall because of the way that it took the snowy setting and really made that an integral part of the relationship in this one and the sense of healing. And then I also really, really liked How to Make Love to a Physicist, because it really focused on our main character, and even though there was a love story element to it, I appreciated the fact that it was more so about her developing as an independent woman and going after the things that she wants. I do think Peach Cobbler, which the cover of the book, you might imagine Peach Cobbler is a critical story to this collection, was a really, really good short story. I struggled with it for reasons I've previously mentioned, but in terms of the way that it's written, I think it's the masterpiece of the book, because Deesha Philyaw, she knows how to write. She knows how to create a symbol in a short story and to wrap the whole story around it so it comes together around this in a very clever and a very just genius way, and I really appreciated that about her writing. And so this is one I'm wholeheartedly going to recommend to a lot of people, even though I know it's not one for me. And I appreciated the overarching theme in this, which is the fact that no person is God. No person should be idolized, and regardless of somebody's hierarchy in the church, in any situation, they should not be idolized. And I think it shows how human and flawed people can be in church, which I think is something that we should definitely be talking about more and more often, because Christians sometimes, and people within religious groups, like to think that they are perfect or above others because they are part of this religious group or entity, when truthfully, as many holy texts often say, remember to judge yourself before you judge others. On a different note, I read Wahala by Nikki May. This is being turned into a TV series very, very soon, and it's out in paperback, and I just wanted to finally read it, and I was really, really disappointed. I really struggled with this. So this is following these 4 women. 3 of them have been close friends for a very long time. They're all mixed race except for one, and they're living in London, and they have like Nigerian history or like cultural heritage, and they've been really close friends. But then this new girl, Isabel, who is mixed race, joins their group, and everything kind of gets messed up and fractured, and Isabel seems to like not be the good friend that they thought she would be once she's infiltrated their group. And I just hated it. I hated it in so many different ways. It was so bad. I really didn't like this book. I think that it's just so immersed in colorism, and it doesn't realise how immersed in colorism it is. I think some of it is supposed to be or intended to be commentary, where they're like, look at these colorist concepts that these women have digested and have in their lives, but also it does not challenge them enough. It does not challenge them at all, and because it doesn't challenge them enough, it just comes across as these are the thoughts that we want to present in this book, which is just wrong. And also there's no positive depiction of a black man. All of the Nigerian men are seen as waste men, and I'm just so fed up of these narratives of books by black characters where they're all with the perfect white men and there's no depiction of black love and just black men depicted in an awful way. I'm frustrated with it. I've had enough. Please, can we be a bit more considerate? Because although it's really nice to see like black women getting a spotlight and getting their stories, it doesn't mean that we need to trample on another group in order to have this. These women are in these like ideal lives, these perfect lives, and they're all unsatisfied and they're all unhappy. And sure enough, you can be in a perfect life and be unhappy, but the way that they go around acting like school children really frustrates me. They are so immature. Basically, people are like, young adult books are so immature, but then they're reading stuff like this. If you aged all of these characters down to 16 and gave them the exact same storylines, I would fully believe that it was a young adult book. That is how immature these characters are acting. Also, Isabel is this person who infiltrates the group, and they don't understand what Isabel is doing, and I'm like, honestly, the amount of times she says, you can tell me anything, like she just keeps saying, you can tell me anything, and it's like, this is so obvious, and these people are so naive that they cannot figure out that maybe she's up to no good. And so many things keep happening, and literally every single person who's a secondary character that they come across warns them to stay away from Isabel, and none of them heed any of those warnings. And yet I was like shocked. I was shocked by the naivety of the characters, the immaturity of the characters, and the representation of like colorism and black men really, really displeased me. And then in terms of the storyline itself, it was so not right. Like the plot twist at the end comes out of nowhere. It's just like The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Dalila Harris. It comes out of nowhere. There's no build up to it. It doesn't make any sense in the context of the story. It's just so random and so out there that I'm just like, what was the point? What was the point? I really couldn't get behind the storyline. I hated the characters. The best thing about this book is the descriptions of the Nigerian food, because it just sounds so delicious, and the Nigerian clothes sound so amazing, and I loved seeing that. But that was literally the only saving grace of this book. Then I went to middle grade and I read Once Upon a Fever by Angharad Walker, and I really, really enjoyed this one, and I was so pleasantly pleased. So this one can be seen for mature middle grade, but also for early young adults. So I'm thinking between the ages of 9, 8 to 11. Those are pretty much the ages of the main characters as well. And we're following these 2 sisters who live in this world where feelings are seen as a sickness, and I just thought it was so creative the way that the feelings and the world building like manifested themselves. So for example, if you're feeling scared, then your body starts to ice over and freeze, and you get very, very cold because you're scared and you're feeling that cold. But also if you fall in love, you kind of stand out so much, you turn bright red, you're coughing up roses and stuff because you've got this feeling of love within you. So in different ways, like anger, you start to breathe fire, you're too hot to touch, and it's all dangerous things that you wouldn't want to have happen to your body because feelings are illnesses. And this scientist is trying to cure these illnesses, and something happens which shows that maybe her younger sibling is strongly ill. At the same time, their mother has got a particular sickness called the water sickness, which happened after a miscarriage, I believe, and so she wants to kind of find a cure for the water sickness, which doesn't exist before. and one of these siblings comes to the idea that maybe emotions aren't too bad, and the other one is like, no, it really needs to be cured, and they kind of end up separated and going on very different journeys. But even though they've separated and gone on these very different journeys, I think it was essential to each of them, and it was so fascinating to see how their stories really differed, but in terms of the plot, it really made sense for them to have each had the individual developments that they have in the way they have them. And I just thought it was fascinating and really well done in terms of it's a standalone, but it manages to build up the world and set up this really good plot that I think works for the story and end it within the same book, while keeping it simple enough that children can read it and enjoy it, but also complex enough that it discusses whether it's worth having negative emotions to be able to feel the positive ones, or if we should eradicate emotions altogether to reach a very safe and consistent equilibrium. And I was impressed by how it managed to have all the fun things that a fantasy should have, as such as adventure and an attempted heist and a villain who's quite scary and intimidating, but also have two characters having separate storylines and character development, but also having world building, but also having a really good message in there. And the fact that it juggled and balanced all of those things really impressed me, and I raced through this one as well, and I think it's just one of the best middle grades I've read so far this year. I know it's still January, but it's still true. I was in the mood for more middle grade, so I just continued on. I read The House of Shells by Efua Traore, and this one is a more so contemporary speculative one. It's based in Nigerian folklore, and we're following this girl who is turning 13, and in the traditional history of being a 13-year-old, if you've got this kind of spirit living within you, she's going to go back to the spirit world and you'll probably die when you turn 13. So her aunt is trying to ward away any spirits that could come to her, but she is just trying to fit in at her new school. Her mum is with someone new and is pregnant, so she's kind of got a lot going on in terms of new man who is seen as her new father figure. Her new sibling is on the way, and she's also moving to this new school where she's being bullied. And I thought this was a nice enough story, and it's one I would really recommend for parents and for children. I always really appreciate when we get to see different types of folklore, different kinds of mythology included, and I think it did that element to the folklore mythology well. It explained all of the magical elements, and the storyline with the magic was adventurous, was like boisterous, but I was impressed by how she balanced it with the very contemporary themes of new girl in a new school, trying to struggle and deal with the bullying that she's facing. As an adult reader, I wasn't as enamored, but I do think that was just me being an adult reader, and it's not a detriment to this book whatsoever. I'm going to be recommending this to schools for sure. Moving on to a book that I didn't like, we have A Parcel of Patterns by Paton Walsh. This is a classic, and it's been redesigned with this gorgeous cover that is too gorgeous for the story that it is. Following what really happened actually is that in a small village, the plague came, the bubonic plague, and they decide to quarantine themselves off. And I was interested in this one because of the fact that we've been through a pandemic which kind of has similar echoes to the plague that they experienced, and the fact that you had to quarantine yourself off. It's written in, I think, the 1800s, so the language is very reminiscent of that. I knew that going in, but just so that you know if you want to give this one a try. So it's got that kind of old English language to it, and it just was really boring, which is amazing that it could be boring because you're following so much grief, you're following so much death, you don't know who it's going to go to next, and yet it still managed to be really boring and kind of read at some points like a list of people who died when, rather than us getting to know those characters, getting to get invested in those stories. So when someone might die because of the plague, we would feel emotional and sad because of it. Instead, it was just more so like a dry list of people gradually dying where there was no hope, and therefore it just went on, and it was sad, but it was brutal, but it was unemotional, and therefore I felt nothing for it. So I ended up just like getting through this one fairly quickly because it's not too long, but it just was really boring, and I think it tried to end on a happy note, but it didn't actually feel like that happy of an ending, in my opinion. I read more middle grade, so this one is Ada Rue and the Banished by Kereen Getten. I've read a Kereen Getten book before, so I was eager to try another one, and this is one of the Bloomsbury Early Readers books, so they're very short with very big writing, and it's for children who are learning how to read and want to develop their reading. I remember using books like this in primary school, so it's kind of nice to see that you get these stories, but you get diverse versions of these stories. And in this one, Adaru moves to a small town and she immediately feels like there's something off with the town, and she sees this random fog and she goes through it and she finds a group of banished people, and it's about why they were banished and how she tries to bring these vanished people back. I also like the fact that she is a selectively mute character, so you get to see that representation. She's a black character, and the way that the magic is working in this one pertains to the fact that it comes from your cultural heritage, so it's harkening back to some of the like mythologies around black cultural history and magic and spirituality in some ways, which I appreciated seeing. I do think that because this story is so short, the plot that they tried to make was a bit too large for the length of the book. In some ways it fit perfectly, but in terms of some small things that they added in, which could have been eradicated and the story would have been overall just as strong and pretty much the same storyline, I think they should have been eradicated to kind of make things a bit simpler but still have enough complexity to test for comprehension. I did think the ending was a bit rushed, but I don't particularly mind because it serves what it needs to do for the story. I like that it had some illustrations at the beginning of the chapters, which makes it more inviting for those early readers. And so yeah, I thought this was a good one, and I definitely recommend it for parents who are helping their children learn to read. I read a lot of middle grade. So the last middle grade I read was actually Grimwood, Let the Fur Fly by Nadia Shireen, and I read this one as the book to break me out of my slump where I was going through a lot of just okay books, and as much as just okay books are fine, I really wanted something good, and then this came along and it managed to give me something good. You know those middle grade books that you read as a child that are so ridiculous and so silly but make you laugh and have a good message at the end? That's exactly what this is. It reminded me of reading Geronimo Stilton in Dutch when I was younger, and it's the kind of book that I would read with lots of the kids that I used to babysit. So we're following these two foxes who live in Grimwood and they love it there, and it's kind of messy and dirty and trashy, but it's still their home. And then they discover that there's another city nearby which is really polished and really clean, and the mayor of that city decides that he wants the land and space that they have to build a massive park so that he can make lots of money, and so he's trying to bulldoze over Grimwood, and they, as the townspeople, are trying to fight back against that idea. And so you can see that there are clearly themes about, you know, gentrification and like taking other people's land and what you can do against that, but at the same time it's about these foxes who are just so wild and so silly, and the townspeople are so wild and so silly, and there's jokes and there's banter and there's lots of really like fun illustrations and playing with the words on the page to kind of get across the randomness and the fun in this book. And I think it's one that children will enjoy, but also as an adult who reads lots of serious books, really sad books and dealing with tough topics, I read this and I was like, this is a nice slice of sunshine in my reading month. And then last but not least, to finish up, I'm going to talk about the two poetry collections I read. And the first one I want to talk about is Please Make Me Pretty, I Don't Want to Die by Tawanda Mulalu. And this poetry collection is the one that I thought I would like the most, but actually I just thought it was an okay read. It's set across the 4 seasons, and a lot of them focus on concepts of beauty, concepts of womanhood, romance and intimacy as a black person living in a very white America, as someone of the diaspora living in a very white America. And it was a really mixed experience. It almost felt like reading an anthology to me, where some of the poems I was like, that's really good, I like this one a lot, and then other ones I just felt very okay about and were just like, oh, I read this poem, let's move on to the next one and hope it's one of the ones that stand out and are unique to me. So I think overall it was quite a mixed bag, but it wasn't my favourite poetry collection. And then I read I Entered Without Words by Jody Gladding, and this was the one I was most nervous to read because it is so uniquely formed. I don't know if you can see it, but there's not that many words on a page, and they're kind of all spread out quite randomly, but sometimes with a bit of emotion to them. So you can read the words in whichever order you want, but the poem will make sense. And what I really like about this collection in particular is that the poet has made certain words on the page that moves in the order you would naturally read bold. So you can read the bold ones quite easily and follow it, and it'll make sense, it'll make a sentence, and that sentence is kind of the key theme for the poem. And then you read the other words, and you can read them as a kind of like mind map, as like individual words which pertain to the sentence that you just read, or you can read them like in different orders with the sentence and like connect up the dots and take slightly different meanings from the poem, but overall the same meaning because you're grounded by the word that was in bold. And I really appreciated that the poet made words bold, so you never feel lost in the poem. You've always got a sense of guidance, something to ground you through it, but then you can have fun with it, you can play with it and get different meanings and different takeaways, and that astounded me. I was so impressed by the fact that I was liking this abstract kind of poetry. And even though there's not that many words on a page, because you can read it in so many different ways, you can get so much out of each one. And so actually this was my favourite poetry collection, and I really, really enjoyed this one. And there you have it. These are all the books that I read in January. Please let me know in the comment section down below, what was the last poetry collection you read, and do you read poetry? Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more, and don't you forget to hit that notification bell to be updated every time I have a new video. And you know what they say, onwards and upwards. Excelsior!